In our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, August 4th, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is here in South Korea following her trip to Taiwan as part of her Asia tour that seeks to reaffirm Washington's commitment to regional peace and prosperity. Foreign Minister Park Jin is in Cambodia for a host of ASEAN-related meetings that seek to boost broader efforts to ensure economic security and regional stability. South Korea's first mission to the moon is poised to take off on Thursday from Florida. If successful, the nation will become the seventh in the world to send an unmanned expedition to the lunar surface. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is here in South Korea, having arrived in the country late Wednesday from Taiwan. Now, on this Thursday, Pelosi met with South Korean National Assembly Speaker Kim Jin-pyo. Underscoring how special it is to visit South Korea as part of her Asia tour, Pelosi said her talks with Kim were aimed at boosting the bilateral alliance through interparliamentary interaction. They also reportedly agreed on the importance of boosting ties on security, economy and governance. Now, Kim and Pelosi also agreed to pass resolutions to further advance the bilateral relationship into a global, comprehensive, strategic alliance. Meanwhile, tensions between the U.S. and China over Pelosi's trip to Taiwan have pundits here weighing in on the balancing act that Seoul needs to maintain given its security ties with Washington and its trade ties with Beijing. My colleague Han Sung-woo shares their thoughts.
Caught in limbo. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan presents South Korea a unique geopolitical challenge, staying as neutral as it can, delicately balancing its ironclad alliance with the United States and the strategic cooperative partnership it shares with China, its largest trading partner.
She'll come to Seoul, and probably Taiwan and China will be the top for the whole agenda for her visit to Seoul. So it will be dominant, and my guess is it will be linked to conditions that South Korea join, both for weapon systems, for intelligence sharing programs that are being extended, for cooperation in the U.S. Personally, I think it's an extremely dangerous game to play.
President of the Asia Institute think tank, Emmanuel Pastreich, believes South Korea must be prudent in how it acts moving forward. But at a certain point, needs to act as an intermediary between the U.S. and China towards building peace and stability in East Asia. This is a point Professor of Chinese Studies Chu Jae-woo agrees with.
South Korea needs to stand tall and above pro-China or pro-United States because South Korean incumbent government has already declared that its foreign policy line is to become a global pivotal state, which means we have to be more concerned about the global affairs and global situation. These global situations we are confronting today is very much deeply involved with human rights situations and territorial sovereignty principles and so forth.
But there are those who point out that Pelosi's Taiwan trip was more symbolic in nature, that South Korea's relationship with both the United States and China will largely remain intact regardless. International relations expert Joe Phillips says China may have overreacted to the event with specific intentions in mind.
A case where Xi needed to make a big stand because of the upcoming party Congress where he's seeking to become essentially to get reelected and essentially to become leader for life in China. And so he wanted to make and he needed to make a big show of Chinese nationalism and standing up to the U.S.
As for Seoul's response to Nancy Pelosi's Asia tour, an official from the presidential office said Wednesday that the country welcomes the House Speaker's trip to South Korea and hopes to maintain close communication with the nations concerned on all issues regarding Taiwan through dialogue and cooperation for peace and stability in the region. 한성우, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, over in Cambodia, Foreign Minister Park Chin says South Korea will upgrade a strategic dialogue with the ASEAN to tackle regional challenges. Now, following talks with his ASEAN counterparts on Thursday, Park announced that members within the association will become the center of the Yoon administration's new initiatives, given the region's growing geopolitical relevance. Park also claimed that countries within the ASEAN will find sincere partners in South Korea. Also on this Thursday afternoon, Park sat down with the ASEAN Plus 3 members, that is, for a meeting with his counterparts from China and Japan as well to address economic collaboration. Meanwhile, Park may hold a separate meeting with his Japanese counterpart on the sidelines of the official ASEAN-related meeting. A senior U.S. official has reaffirmed Washington's commitment to extended deterrence for South Korea. Bonnie Jenkins, Undersecretary for Arms Control and International Security at the State Department, made remarks to this end on Wednesday at the 10th Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference in New York. She also stressed the Biden administration has been very clear about its openness to talks with North Korea, but that the regime itself has been rather unresponsive. Jenkins added the current deadlock does not mean Washington has surrendered its ultimate goal of ridding the Korean peninsula of nuclear weapons. South Korea is poised to become the latest country to launch a moon exploration. The launch itself takes place from Florida on Thursday local time, which would be Friday here in South Korea. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
The Korea Pathfinder lunar orbiter, also known as Danuri, is now 1 day away from its historic launch. Launched via SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket, the lunar orbiter will be sent on its way to the moon from Florida's Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Around noon today, Korea Standard Time, Falcon 9 will be placed on the launch pad. While the initial launch was delayed by 2 days due to additional work that was required following the inspection of Falcon 9, SpaceX said that it has now completed all preparations for the launch. But the only thing that now stands in the way of the launch is the weather.
Things may change depending on the weather and weather forecast on the day of the launch. Even if there's no rain, thunder and lightning can occur at the launch site.
Danuri will be separated from its projectile about 40 minutes after launch, and then it will enter the lunar transition trajectory shortly after. After about 4.5 months, it will finally enter the moon's orbit on December 16th. Even though the launch was delayed by 2 days, the mission of reaching a point 100 kilometers above the moon will be achieved on time on December 31st. Then, for a year, Danuri will orbit the moon 12 times a day to carry out a full-scale scientific mission. With a total of 6 scientific instruments on Danuri, it will create the world's first polarization map of the entire moon, including surface particles and microstructures. Not to mention a map of the far side of the moon, or the lunar hemisphere that always faces away from the Earth. In addition, the lunar orbiter will try to find the best landing site for the upcoming Artemis program to test the world's first space internet communication. Researchers hope that the successful launch of Danuri is just the very first step towards South Korea's road to an era of deep space exploration. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back here on the local front, a special act is in effect as of this Thursday, aimed at ultimately sharpening South Korea's edge over the competition in the semiconductor industry. Our Choi Min-jung has details.
South Korea has newly enforced a special law that could potentially help the country claim dominance in the global semiconductor market. Starting Thursday, the High-Tech Strategic Industries Special Act, also dubbed the Special Act on Semiconductors, takes effect. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy says this will open the door to an innovative environment for growth and boost the industry's competitiveness. The new law is overseen by the Prime Minister and includes various measures to support the local chip industry. First of all, there are more benefits when it comes to the designation of specialized semiconductor complexes. Once a site is designated by the state, the government will provide financial support for power, water, and electricity. Companies are also exempt from conducting preliminary feasibility studies when they are facing time constraints. The act will also help nurture more industry experts. The government will increase the number of specialized graduate schools, provide education programs, and consider increasing the maximum student cap for majors in semiconductors. The final decision as to which companies and schools will be designated for heavy investment will be decided in December or early next year. The industry minister says the government will work more closely with chipmakers under the new act as competition between countries intensifies. For example, the U.S. Congress last week passed a package worth more than $50 billion to boost America's domestic supply of chips to counter China. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and its allies, including Russia, have agreed to their smallest ever production hike in September amid concerns that a global recession will cripple demand. Our Kim Hyo-san has the latest.
The Organization of the Oil Exporting Countries and its allies, which includes Russia, have agreed to a slight increase in output from September. The group, also known as OPEC Plus, said Wednesday that it would produce an additional 100,000 barrels a day next month amid fears that a global recession will lead to lower demand. This is one of the smallest oil production increases in the group's history. The announcement came after the first OPEC meeting since U.S. President Joe Biden visited Saudi Arabia last month, where he urged the country to pump more oil to help cool prices. For July and August, the group pledged to add over 600,000 barrels a day to the market. Following the announcement, Washington highlighted that it's focused on keeping oil prices down.
But what we're focused on is the bottom line for us is that reducing the price of oil in the market is the most important thing, and that's what we're seeing, and that's what we're going to continue to work on.
OPEC, meanwhile, expressed concerns that global supply will not able to be satisfied after 2023, adding that emergency oil stocks remain at their lowest levels in nearly 3 decades. The group's next meeting is on September 5th. Kim Hyo-san, Arirang News.
And on that note, we end the first half of the Daily Report. In the second half, we touch upon the rebound in COVID-19 amid the sweltering summer. Stay with us.
What matters?
It's time now for Viewpoint, and today we talk about the rampant resurgence in COVID-19 caseloads here in the country and elsewhere amid the summer season. For more, I have Professor Kim Moon-gyu from Yonsei University. Professor Kim, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
I also have Professor Yu Byung-wook from Sooncheng University. Welcome back, Professor Yu.
Good afternoon.
Right, Professor Kim, South Korea's caseloads, like I mentioned earlier, have been mounting, as have the numbers of critical cases as well as fatalities. What are your thoughts on our tallies thus far?
Well, the cumulative cases of Korea now reached more than 20,000, and there might be more because some people didn't had the PCR test. So the highest peak was in mid-March, and the 7-day average of our daily tally was about 7,800 per million per day. That was the highest, and now we have about 1,700. So it's rising, and interestingly, the speed of rise almost identical with Japan, and we don't know why, but both countries are now experiencing a BA.5 subvariant of Omicron. So that might be one explanation, and since we have more people never infected, I think it's going to rise for a few more weeks.
Right, I see. And Professor Yu, it appears now that quite a number of countries, perhaps even here, South Korea, they're seeking to focus their COVID-19 strategy perhaps more on treatment rather than on prevention, if I may. How do you respond?
Well, for me, actually, this morning I attended a patient who are Korean, who bring to the 2 line of the rapid kit. So we couldn't imagine before, because it should be a different line, different place, and we should take care of them to isolate it. But now we are living with the patient with the COVID-19, especially what Professor Kim mentioned about BA.5, is sub-variants of the Omicron. Sub-variants of Omicron like a BA.5 and BA.2.75, anything. This is very similar as like a seasonal flu. Okay, let's recall before COVID-19 era. So patients with a influenza, we're not afraid about it. We're having patients, it's like a clinic in the town, small clinic. We are checking their breathing sound, and we give the medication, and we do treat it, and the tests as well. But that time we not isolate each. COVID-19 is very new, but already 2 years passed. So now, it depends on the country, like Korea and US, developed countries in Europe, have capacities and the medical equips and the medical manpower can take care of them. So now we are focused to the treatment and also time to switch of the thinkings about the Omicron, because we are still the hold of the phantasma, the kind of the unknowns, the kind of, we are so afraid about unknown things, but now we are knowing about it and get used to about it. So in Korea, it's also people we are general, we have to and ready to accept this Omicron among our life.
Right, and then of course move forward. Professor Kim, over in the US, President Joe Biden re-entered isolation after a rebound of COVID-19 after a 5-day course of Paxlovid. Could you tell us a bit more about this phenomenon? I mean, how common is it? And is the patient contagious during this rebound?
Yes, President Joe Biden was PCR positive, and he took 5 days course of Paxlovid, and he was getting well, and he turned PCR negative. But 3 days later, the PCR turned positive again, even though the president was feeling well. So this phenomenon we call a rebound happens about 2 to 6% of the patient who took Paxlovid. At the beginning of this drug development, they thought that it might be less than those percentage, but in practice it happens, but it's not that common. As President Joe Biden had his 4th dose of Pfizer vaccine, this kind of rebound can happen in this situation. And researchers believe that the rebound phenomenon can cause transmission. They can spread the virus. So the recommendation is you have to keep isolation for 5 more days, and maybe total 10 days of mask wearing might be mandatory. We don't know why this kind of thing happens, so we have to find it out.
Right, and staying with this phenomenon, Professor Yu, have there been similar cases of Paxlovid rebounds here in South Korea? And what measures do you recommend in the event of such a case? Does the patient receive another, perhaps, course of Paxlovid then?
Well, in Korea, fortunately or unfortunately, we don't have any reports yet, like a Paxlovid rebound case like President Biden. But I can tell our dear watching the Arirang TV, you can see my two fingers, right? We can call their finger. But if I covered it, we cannot see the fingers. But there are still fingers. So this is a Paxlovid. Paxlovid help to the cut of C3L protease, which is the help to duplicate it to the virus, like make the another multiplied. But the problem is the Paxlovid is help to the cutting of the duplicate process for shortly 5 days, but sometimes it's very active and transmissible case like a B.5. It can be not block 100%. Let me know if I have many fingers using the Paxlovid, cover it. But if unfortunately 1 or 2 left, but stop the medication, reduplicate it again. It's kind of one of the theory it can be what the Professor Kim mentioned. So the pharmacological, the company they expect it can be because molecular barrier is different. Cut the DNA process, but all that's why we need more precaution. But Paxlovid more safely we can use in general, but this is the weak point of the medication. But I'm still not agree about the 5-day repeat the Paxlovid. But some experts they suggest since yesterday, cases were high age and high risk groups. Why not we use only 5 days? Let's use a 7 days course of Paxlovid. Probably we will propose the new remedy for high-risk group or reinfected group, something like that.
Right, but we'll still have to wait then and see what decision they come up with. Professor Kim, also here on the local front, amid the summer, there are a number of summer events, of course, given the season, and there have been a number of cluster cases at water parks and also at concerts where I understand giant cannons were used to spray water to the crowds. What precautions would you recommend to ensure pandemic prevention at such places?
As we all know, coronavirus spreads by air droplets, and if people is gathering in a small crowded place, there's a lot of high chance of transmission, especially if people are singing, shouting, and eating. In summer times, people have a lot of activities with water, and every summer we see a rise of GI symptoms like gastroenteritis. There are various infections spreading in the water park or fountains and etc. Most of them have a transmission of fecal-oral transmission. From the feces, it has find a way to get to your hands, and then you get infected. So there are some famous viruses such as Coxsackie or norovirus or rotavirus and some bacteria. But we must remember that corona patients can spread the live virus through the feces. So corona is one of them, So to avoid that kind of phenomena, we have to hand wash very thoroughly, and food hygiene is important, and we should avoid overcrowded areas.
Right. And Professor Yu, what are your words of advice with regard to travel this summer period? Should we be using our own vehicle only? But what happens to those who need to take the train and airplane? And speak about that, I was wondering, is it better? Do you recommend wearing a KF94 face mask or perhaps a KF-AD face mask while you're on the plane or on the train?
Well, let's think a little bit different. Because in July last month, I was in Peru, Bolivia, in Dallas in US, in the Bangkok, Thailand, and the Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and the Kigali in Rwanda for the 6 places. But different countries, they have different, policies against the COVID-19. For example, certain American airlines in our world, Well, I was surprised because even the air cabin staff no wear mask. They didn't recommend to the passenger. But some airline in Southeast Asia, they said announce frequently, automatically, wear a mask. It's automatic response to every 30 minutes. But when you arrive in certain part of Africa, no mask. So how we can enjoy this summer vacation in North Hemisphere, especially in Korea now? So like Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, beautiful countries, in Indonesia and the Philippines, they are start to open for Korean tourists. So also in Japan, limitedly, but it's already open. In air cabin, this is the turbine is to be burned to the virus and refuel of the air, so it's very rare to transmit in air cabin. But it can be transmitted, but if you keep our rule, wear mask properly and don't drink water, not eating. But now in KTX and Korean lay-low services allowed to eat shortly, but yes, you allowed it. But we better to not take the snack for shortly in your train, no problem. So which means each country they have treated and the face on COVID-19 totally different. But Korea, we are just started to open it, but don't be so afraid about it, because if you have more than 3 times the vaccination or you got an experience of COVID-19, so its fatality is very low. So you can go travel. So there are no problem. But keep on your principle on personal hygiene, what you mentioned, KF, somewhere more higher level, wear a mask properly and keep washing your hands, keeping the certain distance in other passenger. You have a right to enjoy the summer vacation.
Right, so it doesn't matter whether you're wearing a KF94 or KF80?
So usually I wear the dental mask, even in the airplane. But how to wear a mask properly, very important. Even high level of well protect, but we can call the chin wear to open your nose, doesn't work.
You need to cover your nose.
Absolutely.
Right, I see. Professor Kim, staying with this then, what do you suggest is a safe holiday plan amid this latest resurgence here in this part of the world?
Well, everybody has to keep his personal hygiene, and because it is summer, you need hydration with safe water. And if you plan for gathering, we recommend you a smaller gathering and make a proper plan to avoid crowding. And if you want to buy something, you can purchase and visit the shop, but maybe we recommend online shopping as an alternative. And if there is a person with underlying condition, the person has to be careful. As Professor Yu mentioned, everybody is going to get COVID-19, but there are some people high in age and with many conditions. That person should be careful by himself.
Right, of course. And Professor Yu, what about you? What do you believe would be a safe way of spending the summer vacation this season? In
North Hemisphere, fortunately, our countries and our neighbor countries are COVID condition, in point of my view, is stable. So even now, 100 more, the 1,000 cases coming, but this is kind of the end of the Omicron variant. Probably another variant will come and resurging again. We will call the 7th wave something in the future. Now we're on the 6th wave. But summer vacations mean this is the new signal for our human being to overcome from the COVID-19 era. So you can enjoy, but I'm 100% agreed what mentioned Professor Kim. Sorry to mention, especially my mom, and he break our rule and she went to London, UK and Australia, her hometowns, but she got it COVID as well. But she's been fine. She's in the middle of 70. I don't worry about it. But many people are start to the traveling. But if you recheck, revise about your health condition, you think it doesn't matter your age, but not much at high age. Your health condition is good enough to travel. It's always in domestic, you can go. But always, and let me say, if you take out the mask, if there are no chance of wear mask, you should be avoid the people just around it. That is the kind of cue and the key to keep and safe to travel in this summer vacation.
Right. Professor Kim, on the testing front then, given the resurgence in COVID-19 here, do you suppose, well, some people are saying that making testing free again perhaps may encourage more members of the public to seek screening. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm not sure. Before we talk about the charge of the testing, we have to rethink about the indication for PCR testing. When health authorities recommended meticulous epidemiologic studies, PCR testing was one of the key components of that system. But now there's no more epidemiologic studies, so situation has changed. So personally, if I see a patient who is healthy, young, without any condition, and there's no one at risk in his family, we don't do the PCR test unless special exceptions. And there's one condition: the patient who is having fever or respiratory symptom, he has to voluntarily self-isolate because he didn't do the PCR testing and he has a chance that he might have COVID-19. And for rapid antigen testing, I don't rely on that test if it's negative. So that's the opinion about the PCR testing.
Right.
Yeah.
Professor, authorities here have said that checkup calls on high-risk patients, they've been halted from this week as a greater number of neighborhood clinics, as you mentioned earlier, are now equipped to offer appropriate medical care. What are your thoughts on this? Because some are worried that checkup calls are not being made to high-risk patients of COVID-19.
Well, this is, I'm saying, the welcome, because before the COVID-19 first stage, we are so afraid about go to the clinic and the hospital because we are so afraid of we might catch from the somewhere internally from the hospital. But now we have to accept it. It's the COVID-19 is like a seasonal flu. Seasonal flu also still annoying us. At least 3,000 to 7,000 people are dead because of seasonal flu. Annually in Korea, we don't have exact data, but we can presume about that. So we still worry about the seasonal influenza, but we're not that much pre-code and worry about like COVID-19 this time. So if the government, they open the more clinic for, we can call one-stop clinic to have a diagnosis, PCR done, and taking the prepared medicine, include Paxlovid or Molnupiravir or whatever, is a one road, and could be, we can accept like a seasonal influenza, especially for aged people, because like in Korea, we say tertiary and quaternary general hospital is always crowded. There are more chance to be catching from somewhere. And also there are cancer patients as well. But if you prepare in the specialized professionally for respiratory and the COVID-19 clinic in some part of point of the intersection who can access more easy, we have to prepare from now on before the winter season coming. So I am welcome. And we are used to, because people can expect it. For example, my hospital, general hospital, very difficult to make appointment so far to reach the doctors, but we expected, this town, light corner, in the nearby bus station, there are COVID-19 specialized clinic we get used to. We can go to welcome, and they will treat us. We are safe past this winter season.
Right, I see. Well, that is good to know that. All right, Professor, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. And Professor Kim, as always, your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A recent remark by the Education Ministry here about the possible lowering of compulsory school age triggered a nationwide backlash that sent the ministry scrambling to better explain its stance on the matter. Our Kim Bo-kyung reports.
Following strong objection to the proposed idea of lowering the elementary school entry age from 6 to 5, South Korea's education minister reiterates that a decision will only be made after careful consideration. During a meeting on Wednesday with education superintendents nationwide, Minister Park Sun-hye said the proposal was initially aimed at making sure the country can close the education gap by offering public education to young children. She added that the proposal was just one of many ways to reach that goal. This reaffirms what she previously said, that the ministry will listen to public opinion and, if necessary, withdraw the proposal.
If people say this policy is really not the right one, then I believe it can be discarded. How could we proceed with a policy nobody wants?
Park previously said the new policy would be gradually enforced over a period of 4 years, starting in 2025, but later said over 12 years could also be possible. But that was met with more backlash from parents and experts in the education sector. They raised concerns over school budgeting not taking into consideration the development stages of children and possibility that it would lead to parents spending more money on private education.
There aren't any measures for how the ministry is going to deal with overwhelming demand to take care of children, which isn't solved even now. Those households that cannot use after-school daycare programs would have to turn to private education.
To this, President Yoon Suk-yeol on Tuesday ordered the Education Ministry to swiftly push for public discussion on the matter. He also requested it to play a facilitator role so that bipartisan discussion can take place in National Assembly. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Right, to spend or not to spend? Now, that is the question among younger adults here in the country amid the dismal economic conditions. Well, in recent days, a growing number of people are choosing to do the latter, that is, not to spend. My colleague Ji-young has more.
With soaring inflation, many people find it hard to save much from their salary if they spend without thinking. But now there's a trend known as the no-spend challenge. The idea is pretty simple. Cut back daily spending as much as possible. One office worker in her mid-20s says she's been doing the challenge for the last 8 months.
With no change in salary, I wasn't too sure if I could buy a house in the future. That's why I started this challenge. For starters, it is more sustainable to set small goals like doing the challenge for 3 days.
During one of the months, she cut her spending drastically, reducing her outgoings to 0 for 22 days. She was able to accomplish this by cutting down on her biggest expenses, eating out and ordering delivery food. When asked about why she's doing the challenge, she said she has a goal in mind.
My ultimate goal is to own a building so that money comes in without me having to work. I'm collecting the seed money for this goal.
Social media is filled with daily posts and hashtags by people like her sharing their tips and stories on zero spending. So I thought, why don't I give it a try?
I also joined the no-spend challenge so I could cut my outgoings as much as possible. Instead of taking a cab or bus, I left the house earlier this morning so I could walk to work.
I usually take cabs on a rainy day, so by walking to work and walking back home, I was able to save around $6. And for lunch, rather than eating out, I ate it at Arirang's cafeteria and was able to save roughly $7 as well. I enjoy getting coffee from the local Starbucks, which costs me about $4, but I have switched to getting free coffee in the break room.
For dinner, I brought some home-cooked food from my parents' house so that I don't spend money on groceries or dining out.
In total, I can save around $24 a day if I continue this challenge. But an expert says, rather than excessively cutting down on all outgoings, it's better to spend on what you place a high value.
Recently, people are spending on what they put value on. Because the economy is not doing well with high inflation, people are trying to cut their outgoings generally. But that is too depressing, so they spend on things they can feel satisfied with.
Ji-young, Arirang News.
For those of you interested in getting a glimpse of the most recent advances on the biopharmaceutical front, my colleague Arirang has just the event in mind. To take a look.
This is a temperature-controlled box called Greenie Medi. It has been used in 63% of South Korea's COVID-19 vaccine transportation. In fact, all Pfizer vaccines imported to Korea were transported by this box, as it's the only one that meets the requirements of being stored at -70 degrees Celsius.
The Greenie Medi box allows low-temperature refrigeration and ultra-cool storage for up to 120 hours. It's not just packaging, as we also guarantee the required temperature throughout the whole process of transportation.
Cutting-edge pharmaceutical technologies are now all on display in one place, BioPLUS-INTERPHEX Korea 2022. The BioPLUS-INTERPHEX Korea 2022 is being held in person for the first time in 3 years due to the pandemic. 200 companies from 12 countries will take part in the 3-day event to introduce the latest biomedical products and digital healthcare technologies. There's also the latest equipment used for what's called cell culture, which is the process of growing microorganisms in the laboratory and can be used when diagnosing infections and testing new drugs. Cell samples can now be collected and analyzed automatically.
Major domestic pharmaceutical companies are using this equipment. It allows the automatic sampling of cell cultures to analyze the results and control the whole experiment.
In the opening ceremony, the Vice Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy reiterated South Korea's position as one of the runners of the global bio industry.
The number of Korean companies that took part in 2022 Bio USA, the world's biggest bio event, ranked second following the US, while overseas investment to Korea's companies increased 15% last year compared to 2016 when it was around $300 million.
He also added that the government aims to abolish unnecessary regulations and encourage private-led growth to boost the country's bio industry. This will include the government's investment of around 13 trillion Korean won, or around $9.9 billion in related companies, and supporting digitalization of medical manufacturing processes. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
Discovering and delivering talent on the Kugak front. Now, this is the gist of a special program that began 5 years ago to raise better awareness about and appreciation of Korea's traditional sounds. Here's Kim Hyun-sung.
Youth meets tradition at the newly opened National Cheongdong Theater of Korea, Saesil. The venue is set to be the hub for young experimental art. Now, this small theater that opened up in July is going to be the site where young talents are discovered and nurtured. Now, this week is all about Korean traditional music. Young artists will be putting their own take on traditional music in the week-long program Blossom of Young Artists. Every night from this Tuesday to Sunday, Cheongdong Theater's Saesil will feature a new set of performers.
This project is an incubating project that grows and supports young traditional musicians. I hope that we can go beyond continuing the legacy of Korean traditional music and develop the genre.
Team Odyssey, a dynamic duo of string and percussions, started the week off. They're experimenting with sounds and rhythm to narrate a journey.
Odyssey is the story of Odysseus journeying to Ithaca. We're also on our own journey to find our music, which is why we named our team Odyssey, and we've put elements of the story into our performance.
Korean traditional music is hardly mainstream, which is why programs that fully support experimental traditional music are hard to come by. But Blossom of Young Artists has been supporting experimental musicians since 2017 and has discovered 250 artists.
This program is a big stepping stone for young traditional musicians. It's not easy to put our creations on stage, so we're very thankful for this precious opportunity.
The project director says that the more audiences see traditional music, the more they discover its true charm. And it's projects like these that help keep the genre alive, now and in the generations to come. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. France has just passed a relief package aimed at combating inflation. The bill in question was approved by France's parliament on Wednesday. The legislation increases pensions and some welfare payments by 4%. It also introduces a 3.5% cap on rent increases and keeps existing caps on gas and electricity prices. For French President Emmanuel Macron, this bill could help fulfill a promise made to boost household purchasing power amid soaring inflation. The French president had to work with rival parties to get it passed after he lost an absolute majority in parliament in June's legislative elections. The bill is now set to go through a final debate and vote in France's Senate later this week. Kansas has voted to keep its current rights on access to abortion. In a Tuesday referendum, the conservative U.S. state saw over 60% of voters choose not to amend the state's constitution on abortion. The amendment would have given lawmakers in Kansas the ability to restrict or ban abortion. The referendum on it was the first such vote since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June, which previously guaranteed American women their reproductive rights nationwide. With the final trickle of votes still being counted, the official result will be confirmed in a week. Airbus has axed an outstanding order from Qatar Airways amid a dispute over the condition of previously ordered planes. Industry sources say the scrapped order was for 19 Airbus A350 long-haul aircraft worth a total of around $3 billion. It comes amid a dispute over the condition of 20 previously ordered planes, which Qatar Airways claims are degrading prematurely. The planes reportedly had damage to anti-lightning mesh exposed by peeling paint. Airbus has said the issue is cosmetic, but Qatar Airlines says it could pose a risk to passengers and is suing Airbus for $1.4 billion after grounding half its fleet. A volcano in Iceland has erupted near the capital of Reykjavik. According to Iceland's meteorological agency on Wednesday, the Fagradalsvik volcano erupted after days of earthquakes. It is spewing magma over a lava field created by last year's eruption. The eruption occurred just 15 kilometers from Iceland's international airport and 25 kilometers from the capital. The airport remains open, but the meteorological agency said that a code red has been declared to prevent airplanes from flying near the volcano. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Thursday afternoon. Today, thermometers were above 25 degrees even in the early morning. The mercury is hitting above 32 in Seoul and Gwangju and 37 in Daegu, where it's baking in peak summer heat. And feels like temperatures are even 1 to 3 degrees higher than the actual temperatures due to the muggy weather. Overall, skies are murky, but bands of rain clouds might bring showers to some inland regions. So precipitation may vary from 5 to 60 millimeters, so please drive safely as blustery showers can really affect your visibility. And it's even hotter than yesterday, and heat warnings have been expanded nationwide. Heat is a major weather threat, so knowing what to do to stay cool, as well as knowing the signs of heat-related illnesses can save your life. While the extreme heat will stick around, showers can't be ruled out, and we're expecting another round of rain over the weekend. Now, let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
That brings us to the end of Thursday's edition of the Daily Report. We'll be back with more coverage tomorrow, that is Friday. Join us then. Thank you for now.
오늘 어떻게 오셨죠?
오늘 구경하러 왔습니다. 방청객인데.
근데 아까 저 뒤에서 기타 치시던데?
그거 거기서 구경하는 거거든요.
그 자리 얼마예요?
거기 공짜예요.
공짜예요?
받고 하는 건데.
진짜요?
네.
부럽다. 나도 거기 할래.
왜 갑자기 반말이시죠?
안녕하세요. 오늘 어떻게 오셨죠?
저 기타 치러 왔습니다.
성함이 어떻게 되시죠?
조창현입니다.
네, 나이가 어떻게 되시죠?
26살입니다.
네, 감사합니다.
만 나이입니다.
밴드방을 한번 가보도록 하겠습니다. 나오시죠. 오늘 빈센트 블루 아임 라이브 오신 걸 환영합니다. 파트가 어떻게 되시죠?
그냥 죽었어요.
네, 이름이 어떻게 되시죠?
준석.
오늘 소감이 어떠세요?
여기 공간 오랜만에 와서
여기 해본 적 있으신가 봐요?
많이는 안 했는데 한번 해봐서
나를 배신하고 딴 사람을 걸 했다.
배신했었죠 옛날에.
네, 안녕하세요. 네. 성함이 어떻게 되시죠? 화가 많이 나신 것 같은데. 파트가 어떻게 되시죠?
드럼.
네, 오늘 소감 한마디 부탁드립니다.
소감이요?
네.
틀리지 말라.
혹시 다리를 왜 이렇게 심각하게 떨고 계신지 모르겠는데. 리듬 타고 있어요. 리듬 타고 있어요? 그 파트가.
파트요?
네.
오늘 땜빵으로 왔습니다.
땜빵. 오늘 소감 한 말씀. 네, 이렇게 오늘 멋있는 밴드 분들을 한번 알아봤습니다. 빈센트 블루였고요. 많은 시청 부탁드리고 많은 사랑과 관심이 필요로 합니다. 저는 행복한 인생 되시고 빈센트 블루 많이 사랑해 주시고.
출연료 있어요?